Thank you for joining us for Patient Conversations with Leah, a place where patients and caregivers can talk with me about the real, relevant, and yes, even the raw aspects of their lung cancer journey. Because we want to know and understand these perspectives firsthand from those who are the true experts on what life is like for a young adult diagnosed with lung cancer. Hi, today I have my friend Haley with me. Haley lives in Crestwood, Kentucky, just a few minutes away from me, and she was diagnosed at the age of 37 in September of 2023 with EGFR exon 19 deletion. So I'm going to turn it over to Haley so she can just tell you a brief summary of her story.
Thanks, Leah. I started probably in April of 2023, just having some kind of vague symptoms. I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for years. My husband's also in healthcare. We kept kind of shrugging things off. I was having shortness of breath with exertion, but I was like, well, I've gained weight. Is that what it's from? Some like nausea, some fatigue, but I'm also a mom of little kids. So I wasn't sure if that's kind of what was going on. Was it anxiety? Was it just all the things that run through your head? Because it can't possibly be anything serious at 37. I started having some more serious symptoms. I was having like a cough that was worse at night, which again can be related to reflux. Some heaviness in my chest, felt like I couldn't get a deep breath. But then I was like, well, is this just anxiety? Is this, what is this? I ended up, we went to Croatia in June of 23. And before we went, I was like, I've got to get in with the doctor. But being the great nurse that I am, did not have a primary care doctor. So it took me until September 1st to get in with somebody. Whenever I went in there, she heard a new murmur that I had never been diagnosed with. Even throughout, like, I just seen an OB not long before that. And, they listened to you, said everything sounded fine. So I was like, well, that's kind of strange. I hadn't been sick recently, but my shortness of breath had increased. The cough had gotten worse. I noticed like even going up a flight of stairs was kind of getting more difficult. So we did labs that day in EKG, and then they sent me to get an echo done, but that wasn't until a couple of weeks later. I think it was like September 26th, where they saw a large pleural effusion. Again, like, okay, what could this possibly be? Do I have a blood clot? Am I having anxiety because I can't breathe because I have a huge blood clot in my lungs? Never would I have ever thought that lung cancer was a possibility. Even again, like I worked in the ER for years and years. I never saw a young person who had never smoked with lung cancer. So I ended up getting sent to the ER 2 days later, and my chest x-ray looked like I had horrible pneumonia, which didn't make sense. And so that's when they did a chest CT to rule out a blood clot. And that's when they found a large mass in my left upper lobe and multiple nodules everywhere. So it's kind of how everything started.
Right. How did you feel when you heard you have lung cancer?
I think I was just in shock. My husband was actually on call that day. I'd kind of been pinged back and forth between the cardiologist's office because I hadn't been seen yet, but that was who was supposed to be giving me my echo results, and the primary care doctor. They were like, well, we're not going to do anything about your echo being abnormal because that's the cardiologist's thing. So whenever, after like pursuing, the primary care doctor was finally like, just go to the ER. Let's roll out a PE. Justin was at work. He was actually working in the OR at the time. I had Everett at ninja class. My now 7-year-old, he was 6 at the time. And Adeline, I think, was at a musical theater thing. So I was like, okay, well, let me try to figure out where am I going to put all my kids? And then I'm like, I probably should get somebody to go with me, just to have a support person, just in case. So one of my friends, Jess, actually came with me and sat in the ER with me. Justin got there right before the doctor came in. So I don't like if you're familiar with at all with the ER, a lot of times you'll see a mid-level provider. Well, if the actual like physician or head doctor comes in, you know something's wrong, which I was like, oh gosh, like, and they sit down, you're like, okay, tell me what it is. I know it's not a blood clot at this point. I just felt like my entire world was ending. There was no way this was happening. Justin, my husband at 29 had been diagnosed with Burkitt's lymphoma, and he was stage 3, did chemo and everything for about like 8 to 10 months, but has been in remission for years. And I just kept thinking, how in the world can could my husband have had cancer? And then here I am, 10 years later with cancer as well. Like, what did we do wrong? Why are we being targeted? And I know, Leah, this resonates with you for sure. And how do I keep my kids safe? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. It's shocking. Like you said, not only is it shocking, but then, when this is, like you said, your husband already had a cancer diagnosis, as mine did as well. And he's fine too. But, you're like, what is going on? Our poor kids, they're going to have to relive this again. And
Right.
It's just really, really a lot to take in anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But then you add that this is a second diagnosis that our family is dealing with. And that does definitely bring a whole new, like,
Right.
kind of, I don't know, panic into the situation.
And just the fear of the unknown. Like, I knew Justin was okay, but then I'm thinking they didn't know for certain at first, because I had an abnormal mammogram, which ended up just being a cyst. But so they weren't sure if it was like stage 4 breast cancer or if it was, lung cancer, which I kept thinking, surely this has got to be breast cancer. It can't be lung cancer. Because again, never smoked. My grandparents had all smoked. They were super unhealthy, like kind of all passed away from lung related problems. And I was like, I will never smoke. I am not going to do that to my body. I'm not going to do that to my loved ones. Like, I'm going to stay as healthy as I can to avoid that happening.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Here we are. I had a similar situation, right? So I get it. So we're talking a lot about, like, our families and how this affects our children, our spouses. So how do you feel, in what ways that your diagnosis has affected your relationships, like with your family, your friends, strangers? What has lung cancer kind of, I guess, initiated in those relationships? Has it been good stuff, bad stuff, in between?
I find like we are so blessed and so lucky. Like we're not from Kentucky, so we didn't have any immediate family that were super close by. My in-laws are the closest in Knoxville, but my family is all in Louisiana. I cannot tell you the amount of support and just rallying around us and our kids that we had I mean, we've only lived here for a couple of years. I think we moved in October of 2021. Like, we were definitely placed here for a reason. Like, I got to meet you right down the street, I always tell everybody, Leah is my favorite part of lung cancer. Like, lung cancer is the absolute worst, but at least I have Leah. Like, I never had to worry about, because my kids were in so many extracurriculars. We literally had something, I think, every single day except for Sunday. I never had to worry about how my kids were getting to or from anything. My friends were amazing. My family all flew in. And my mom, my sister, my in-laws were here. Like, before I even got out of the hospital, they were here to help take care of the kids and everything. I do feel like on a daily basis, sometimes it is hard whenever you're hearing people complain about just kind of dumb things or things. I mean, it's not dumb to them, but things that I'm like, gosh, do you know how lucky you are? Like, are we really complaining about the kids not putting up their clothes today? So I feel like sometimes that kind of makes it harder to be a friend sometimes. but all in all, like very, very blessed. Like, I think it was really hard for Justin whenever I was diagnosed, just because he had already walked this journey. And he's probably gonna be embarrassed that I say this. He could not stop crying. I was like, look, whenever you were diagnosed, I cried in the shower alone, not in front of you. Can you get it together and stop crying in front of me? Because I'm having a hard time. I can't, you're supposed to be my strong person. I can't see you just crying all the time. But he just knew how hard it was on him, and he couldn't fathom me having to go through that as well.
Right. I think it's definitely, as the patient, it's hard on everybody that loves you. It's hard on your kids, your spouse, your parents, your siblings, your friends, all that. But it is really, really hard when you are trying to keep it together and trying to like be positive and like think positively, because I do think that your mind and your thoughts around things can determine like some success or some not so great things.
Right.
And when you see people that you love crying or upset, I know for me, it was like my brother, my dad, like you're saying, Justin, Todd, these strong people in your life, and they're crying. And I think, at least for me, I like to be the nurturer. Like when somebody's upset, I want to be the caregiver. I don't want to be cared for,
Right.
So it definitely is hard. And like you said, that your everyday regular relationships that you had before definitely changed, because there's so much of people complaining about, oh, I sprained my ankle and now I can't play tennis for 4 weeks.
Right.
I'd like that as an option, like that wasn't
I just want to see my
doorway.
kids grow up. Yeah.
Right. So it does put some things in perspective too, just in general with your life, with your kids, the things you choose to do, the people you surround yourself with. So I agree 100% with that.
Yeah. Well, and being a people pleaser too, I'm just like, I can't, it was so hard for me to have people who were having such a hard time because of me. So then I, did the normal thing and made death jokes, which also to try to lighten the mood, which also didn't go over too well.
That goes with, we do this well together.
Yes. Right. Probably shouldn't do that to your in-laws, but
right.
It's fine.
Yes, I agree. And so what I find fascinating, many things, but one of the things I find fascinating in your situation versus my situation. So we're in the same town. We were diagnosed in the same hospital,
right.
randomly enough to end up with the same oncologist.
Yes.
And yet we've had 2 different courses of treatment, probably because I was 4 years ahead of you and things are changing so much. So can you kind of just explain or describe, like when you were hearing all this information and, for me, it was like, oh, we're going to start chemo and Keytruda right now. And then it was like, oh, no, we're going to back up and do this. So can you kind of explain to me or describe the moment when you guys decided on a treatment plan and what factors influenced that? Because you've had some cutting edge therapy versus what I had went through.
So whenever I was diagnosed, it was not, let's start something immediately. It was, let's see if this is gene driven. So they had sent off my pleural effusion fluid that they had gotten from a thoracentesis whenever I was in the hospital to see what exactly it was. That was whenever it came back to say pulmonary adenocarcinoma a couple of days later. And then the following day, I think it was October 4th, I'd gotten the gene mutation testing back saying it was exon 19 deletion mutation. So whenever I saw my local oncologist that day, it was kind of just like, this is the treatment. This is it. There were no options given at all. Like, hey, this is best case scenario. You're going to take this daily pill for the rest of your life and it's going to be okay. Basically, it wasn't really until I talked to you that I realized how serious everything was. Cause I was trying to stay off Google cause that's really scary. So that was when we're like, okay, we need to get other opinions, especially being in healthcare. You don't ever just stick with one opinion. So we'd reached out to Mayo in Jacksonville just because I had a connection there and we were going there for fall break. And And they agreed. They were like, Tagrisso is the way to go for right now. There are new studies coming with chemo along with the Tagrisso, but a lot of times we like to see how you respond to the Tagrisso first. So after I went to Mayo and they kind of agreed with what my local oncologist had said, then we had also kind of been told by some other friends in healthcare, you need to go to Sloan Kettering in New York, or you need to go to MD Anderson in Houston. Those are the top two for lung cancer. That's who I would want, taking care of me or my family member. We have family in Houston, so we just kind of, and it was close to Louisiana, so that's kind of the route we went. Love my team there. They agreed that Tagrisso was the right thing to do for now. It was like, we like to see whenever you hit a plateau, we like to have consolidation therapy worked in. So radiation, surgery, both. But we weren't there yet because I hadn't had my first set of scans. So I went back there in March, the end of March, to have my first ever PET scan because for some reason my local oncologist never did a PET scan. And I showed complete metabolic response, which was insane. I never thought I was going to hear those words. So my oncologist at MD was so excited. He was like, okay, I'm calling Dr. Antonoff right now, who is a phenomenal surgeon with MD Anderson, who will do surgery on stage 4 patients. I had an appointment. I don't know if she missed her lunch that day or what, but I had an appointment with her that day because before I flew out. And I was scheduled for surgery, a month and a half later. So I had surgery May 10th, and they took out almost my entire left upper lobe because they kept talking about how the thought behind surgery is that, no, we can't offer you a cure, but hopefully we can prolong it coming back. So if we remove that primary tumor, that's normally where it'll come back first, then we can prolong life. So I had almost my entire left upper lobe removed, all the lymph nodes that they could remove. I had some that were hardened onto my pulmonary artery. And then I also finally, I got a Plerex that was placed in December, which was awful. Had that removed and had a pleurodesis done. So I've not accumulated really any other fluid since, thank goodness, because that was miserable. And yeah, I just had more scans done about a week and a half ago, and we are still good.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I think, I mean, now, Haley's talked about how I helped her in the beginning, but I'm actually getting ready to have the same surgery done. So now Haley, I was like, I'm going to have some questions for you. And so we went to lunch and I was like, okay, I need to know this. I need to know this. I need to know this. So that's what's so phenomenal about this like group that, everybody experiences things a little differently, but there are definitely things that we can learn from each other. I know I know for myself, and I feel like for most young lung cancer patients, there's this whole, you look good, you haven't lost your hair, you must be healthy, you've got the good lung cancer or whatnot. But I do believe that there is a huge mental piece, mental health piece that comes along with this diagnosis. And, everybody deals with it kind of differently. Some people are open to talking about it, some people are not. But in your case, what do you think is the biggest mental health implication from this diagnosis?
I think I feel like I'm never going to feel at ease again. I feel a constant anxiety, just is, especially, the scan anxiety, is this going to be the time that I have progression? Which a lot of times the Facebook groups and everything are great, but sometimes when you're reading, you're like, okay, well, this patient is around the same time of their journey as I am, and they're having progression. When is that going to be me? I have a daughter who's 11 who hasn't gone through any of the changes yet. Am I going to be around for that? Because I can't imagine her having to go to my husband and being like, hey, Dad, I I can't remember the last time that I actually slept through the night. I don't know if you're the same. Just constant worrying, spiraling over silly things. Just, yeah, the mental health aspect of it. And I had to ask to see someone whenever, after I was diagnosed. I'm like, my anxiety is out of control. Like, is there something within this health system that I can talk to and get some help with this? Because this is not good for anybody. This is not good for me. This is not good for my kids or my husband. You're just also in this like low where I mean, I stayed in pajamas for a while, just not like my body had failed me. Why was I going to go and get up and do anything? Yeah.
It is a constant stress. And even 5 years down the road, I still
Right.
have those same like fears. And, I think my husband, thinks that like I'm gonna have this surgery and we're gonna take out the quote unquote mothership, and then I'm gonna be able just to relax. But I'm
No.
not sure that that's ever gonna happen, just because it's not a curative type cancer. It's just, like they said, a chronic disease would be great. But I also
Yeah.
think a chronic disease, like people who are diabetic, some people die because of that
Right.
complication.
Right.
Like emphysema, that's a chronic disease. My grandmother died of emphysema. So like this whole carrying the burden, and how do you talk to your kids, and how do you do you write them letters because you might not be there for something? Do
But then
you
it's also, if you do the letters, and I feel like that's just so fine. Like, then I'm accepting that I'm not going to be here for that. And am I even ready for that at
right?
this point? But then
Yeah.
I don't want to wait till too late and miss getting to write the letters.
Yep. I
So
haven't written the letters yet. I've tried
yeah,
50 times, and I just sit down there with the paper and I'm like, ooh,
it's
because like
just
you
like,
said, you don't want to admit like you're throwing in the towel, I'm not going to be here. But there are things you want them to know.
right,
And
right.
it's a very delicate, fine line. And I think because we look so healthy, people just assume, oh, everything's okay. And that's why I think people too feel like it's okay to complain about their sprained ankle, or their kids not picking up their clothes, or whatever it may be, when you're sitting there going, I have scans next week and I can't sleep, and I haven't slept in 3 years because all I've
Right.
worried about is X, Y, or Z, or am I going to make it to this? And, the awkward feeling of, do you celebrate these milestones? Like, yes, you celebrate, but just like I had radiation last week and they were like, oh, do you want to
Mhm.
ring the bell? And I'm like, heck no, I'm not ringing the bell. And that's a personal
Right.
choice. Some people, and I think they should, if that's
Mhm.
good for you, ring the bell all you want. But for me, in my head, it's means I'm cured. And I know that's not the case. And I was like, I'm not ringing the bell. I'm not ringing the bell. So,
Well, and I feel like a lot of times too, I think you've said you've had to do the same thing. It's like you feel like you're re-explaining. Like, this is not curative. So everybody thought having the surgery, oh, this is great. Your cancer is inactive. You're done.
you're in
No, I'm
remission.
right. I'm never done. I never get the chance of remission. Like, it's, yeah. My kids, like Adeline and Everett, I think that they really do think like, okay, she's cancer free right now. Nothing's active. She's good. And I'm okay with them thinking that for right now, just because they're
Absolutely.
little and I want to protect their hearts and their minds and everything. But yeah, I know whenever I talked to my behavioral nurse practitioner about it, um, I was like, I just feel like whenever people are congratulating me, I just need to be like, but wait, this is not it. Like, it's still there. This is not the end. And she's like, well, you kind of have to find a healthy balance of, do you say that every time where you're like, yeah, thanks, it's, everything's great now, or shrug it off or whatnot.
It's a hard one. It's a hard
Mhm.
one. And it's even people that are close to you. It's, yeah, people you
Yeah.
meet. And I have my outward, symbols
Mhm.
of, cancer, and people ask about all the time is like, oh, how much detail do you give them? Like, you
Right,
want to
right.
educate them that, you know, this could happen to you too, even if you don't have a history of smoking, but yet you don't want people to be like, ooh, staying away from her. She's like,
Right.
yeah. So it's nice to have a community. It's nice to have friends that kind of get it, and you don't really have to filter yourself, I guess.
Yes, that is definitely nice. Again, we did not have this where we lived 4 years before we moved here, which is very small town. We did have some close friends, but it just wasn't as big of a community, and there wasn't as much like readily available healthcare wise. So I'm definitely am glad that we were here whenever this happened, even though I wish it wouldn't
We're
have
here
happened.
for a reason, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate your time today. I know everybody's busy, and I think this was an excellent conversation. I think a lot of people will appreciate hearing what you had to say, and just our back and forth about how we understand what each other are going through and how we've got an outside relationship and we talk regularly and all those kind of good things. And, that's kind of one of my wishes for everybody, is that they would have someone that they connect with at a deeper level that they can form relationships with as well. So
Right.
I really, really appreciate your time with us this morning.
Thank you.